Okay, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board. My name is Councillor Peter McCabe and we have a very full agenda this evening as always. So I would ask that speakers stick to time in order that we can get time for questions, and that when the questions are being asked that we don't ask multiple questions and we are succinct in the point that we are seeking to get some answers to. Item 1 is apologies for absence. We've had apologies from, do you want to do those, Jade? Or? Okay. From Councillor Usama Kawesi, who is away. We've had apologies from Nicola Da Silva, a young inspector who has university exams, and we wish Nicola luck with those. Sarah is going to have to disappear shortly, but she's had been courteous enough to inform us that she's got some real pressures on this evening. And the other thing is that Councillor Jennifer Gould, who is the vice chair, was the vice chair of this committee, has resigned from the council with effect from Monday the 5th of January. And I think it's really important that I acknowledge the contribution that she's made to this board and to our council. Sorry, do you want to?
Yeah, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Gore was the vice chair of the scrutiny committee.
Sorry.
Yeah, not the board. Just a point.
Yeah, I'm mistaken. She's not the vice chair of this. She was a member of this committee or this board, but the vice chair of health scrutiny. And it's important that I acknowledge her contribution to the work of this board and to health scrutiny and to the council in general and to the community. When people become councillors, they do so motivated by the desire to serve the public. And whilst she was a political opponent, I think it was clear to everyone that she had a real commitment to the work that we do and scrutinise here. And so I'd like to thank her, and I've seen lots of heads nodding. Could we minute the fact that we thank her for her contribution and her service to Merton? So there are some members joining us online, and we can see them up there. And we've got a number of guest presenters who will introduce themselves or be introduced when we get to that. So item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Are they agreed? Okay, I'll sign those. Is that somebody wanting to?
Dave is just.
Oh, right, okay. No, it's not somebody raising a question about the minutes because I've already signed them now, so it's too late. Speak now or forever hold your peace. So item 4 is the annual public health report from the Director of Public Health, which you've had copies laid out on our tables, and Russell, you're going to introduce that with Selena to talk to some of the slides. But can I say, I mean, I said in my forward that I think it's a great report, and it was me who inserted the word excellent, and I wanted to draw attention to the fact that I do think you are an excellent Director of Public Health, and we are lucky to have you. So please present your annual report.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCabe. So I'm delighted to be able to publicly launch Merton on the Move at the board this evening, and that members have a copy. This year's annual public health report focuses on physical inactivity. As always, it's taken a tremendous amount of work to produce the report, and I'd like to thank all team members, partners, stakeholders and residents through their case studies who have contributed to it. In particular, from the public health team, I wish to formally express my thanks to those who've led on its compilation. That's Samina, Helen, Rachel, Helena, Louise, Georgia and Dan. Next slide, please. So in terms of what is set out this evening, firstly, it's helpful briefly to remind us what public health is and why we produce an annual report. I'll then set out some background for it before Samina will outline recommended levels of activity and a behaviour change model. We'll then look at the health benefits of physical activity, examples of activities in Merton, the Borough of Sport, and then move on to the report key chapters which are set out. So they're physical inactivity in the environment, in children and young people, in working age adults and in older people. And the presentation ends with examples of some of the key recommendations and next steps. So what is public health? Public health is defined as the science and art of preventing disease, prolonging life and promoting health through the organised efforts of society. It considers principles of social justice and equity, promoting and protecting better health for all and leaving no one behind. The production of an annual report is a statutory duty. It sets out the main challenges for improving health and well-being. It is used to amplify existing good practice, as well as acting as a further call to action for partners and other stakeholders to work together to deliver solutions to address the issues it raises. Next slide, please. So why focus on physical inactivity? Well, physical inactivity is one of the big priorities for the Chief Medical Officer for England. And another, alcohol, was tackled last year in Tackling Drugs Together. It is important for this year's report to recognise that there is a general trend at population level in England for increasing levels of sedentary behaviour. However, the dangers of inactivity have long since been recognised, as have the benefits to all of us of moving more. The Greek philosopher Plato, 2,500 years ago, said lack of activity destroys the good condition of every human being, while movement and methodical physical exercise save it and preserve it, and that's true today. So some more recent context and important background to note. The NHS 10-year plan, a new plan, has a shift from sickness to prevention that highlights physical activity as a key part of it. Our own health and wellbeing strategy places a strong emphasis on addressing behavioural risk factors as well as environmental for physical inactivity. And our work with the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, for CIPFA, and our Health Foundation they noted in their report on prevention the unifying mission of Borough of Sport, which I'll come to later, to generate momentum. For physical inactivity, the report explores the reason why some people are inactive and how certain groups are affected more than others. It sets out how to tackle barriers to activity, those that make it challenging for us to be active, whether that is the environment around us or our own behaviour or both. And it aims to guide local partnerships into a series of actions. Next slide, please. So I mentioned Plato earlier. There's an overwhelming modern clinical evidence of the benefits to health of physical activity, so much so that the CMOs for the UK, including Professor Sir Chris Whitty, have collectively said if physical activity were a drug, we would refer to it as a miracle cure due to the great many illnesses it can prevent and help treat. The significant benefits for health, both physical and mental, can help to prevent and manage over 20 chronic conditions and diseases, including some cancers, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and depression. This slide is one of the most important to clock tonight. It shows that increasing time spent being physically active leads to greater health benefits. This includes improved physical and mental health and helping to prevent and manage many of those chronic conditions. The most significant improvements, though, are seen in those who are currently inactive. That's those doing less than 30 minutes activity per week. So a major focus that has informed this report is that circle, the green circle there that is highlighted, and that's referred to as the area of greatest impact. Getting inactive people to do some activity has the greatest impact, both for them personally and wider population health. Consistent changes can lead to significant changes over time, especially of our routines, including, for example, regular walking or cycling for short journeys instead of using a car, taking the stairs instead of the lift, parking further away from the entrance to the shops to add extra steps to your walk, then carrying, for example, heavy shopping back, which adds strength-based activity with the cardio. I will now hand over to Samina, who will take us through the recommended levels of physical activity by age group.
Thanks, Russell. The UK Chief Medical Officer's guidelines on recommended levels are shown here for children and young people and adults. For children and young people, you will see the advice on the number of minutes of physical activity per day, and much of this needs to be vigorous exercise. On the right, for adults, this is recommended levels of activity in a week, which includes doing some vigorous exercise, as well as advice on building strength, reducing the amount of time sitting down, and as we get older, improving balance. Next slide, please. To change behaviour to be more physically active requires a combination of our capability to change, together with the opportunity and motivation to do so. This is known as the COM-B model. Capability is a person's physical capacity, for example, having the strength and stamina to participate in an activity, and also their psychological capacity, so having the knowledge of how to be active or being able to monitor how active you are. Opportunity refers to factors which make engaging in a particular behaviour possible and include physical opportunity, like the resources or facilities available, and then social opportunity, which are the social norms that can encourage or discourage a behaviour. Motivation is about actually exercising and if they want to do it, and do they see the benefits from it, and so on. Next slide, please. The reasons why children and young people are less active are varied. Changes in our society, the environment and technology have all contributed to the shift towards inactivity. You can see some examples on the left of the slide, for example, the growth of screen time. Examples for adults can be seen on the right, such as the lack of time is often given as the main reason for not participating in as much physical activity or family commitments, studying and working. Next slide, please. Doing some physical activity is better than doing none. In children and young people, this will benefit their health, overall development and well-being. The diagram on the right shows some examples like developing balance and coordination, feeling a sense of achievement and improving mental health and well-being. As Russell has mentioned, physical activity can help to prevent and manage chronic conditions and diseases, such as up to 35% of cardiovascular diseases, which can be prevented through exercise. Increasing uptake would have a significant impact on the population because at the moment, 1 in 3 of the working age population has at least one long-term condition and 1 in 7 have 2 or more. I'll now hand back to Russell for the Borough of Sport.
Thanks, Amina. As councillors and colleagues are aware, our Borough of Sport initiative provides many opportunities for residents to become more active. Being physically active brings people together, is fun and has additional social benefits, for example, the reduction of loneliness. Since September 2023, over 45 Borough Sport projects and programmes have been rolled out locally, reaching over 42,000 participants. The Borough Sport is not just about sport, its missions are everyone in Merton no matter their background, has the opportunity to be active and access sport and physical activity. Merton will be the natural home of sport in London and will protect, preserve and grow our sporting heritage. Merton will have a thriving sports and leisure economy that benefits the local economy. And Merton's Activity Finder provides a comprehensive list of activities under Borough Sport banner. Next slide, please. Some examples of activities and facilities to increase physical activity are set out in this slide by children and young people, working age and older adults. They include examples on outdoor play, multi-use games areas, and the Merton Moves initiative for older adults that has a case study you can find on page 68 of the report. Please can I encourage members to take some time later to read case studies throughout the report, as they provide great insight from our residents. Next slide, please. I'll now give a brief flavour of chapters of the report. Firstly, physical activity and environment, which is found on page 14. Where we live can certainly influence how physically active we are. This ranges from how easy it is to walk, wheel, cycle, to whether we have access to parks, gardens, open spaces and sports facilities. Changes in the physical environment alone may not be enough to help us be active. It can also be necessary to change our relationship with our neighbourhoods, for example, addressing fears and safety, alongside other interventions like support from behaviour change methods. Combined with this, urban and spatial planning can play a significant role in making physical activity more of a default option. Merton's 2024 local plan is guiding improvements to our built environment, including designs to create physical activity promoting environments. Incorporating active design principles helps to create environments that encourage us all to be active. And for example, with upcoming opportunities, Public Health will be working with Jeremy's team to inform the shaping of the Malden Town Centre as a part of this regeneration programme. Next slide, please. The next report chapter is on children and young people, starting on page 30. Children and young people are naturally active and like playing. The diagram here on the top right-hand corner of the slide shows the increased benefits specific to disabled children, but this is also applicable to all children. Active play is a basic principle and a key principle here. Children need to be encouraged to break up long periods of sedentary time with light physical activity as a minimum, and each and every day. Good parent role modelling is a great starting place, particularly for young children. Parents who are active and play with their children encourage their children to be active. We have many interventions. Our whole systems approach to obesity and our Eat Well, Be Active approach looks to embed physical activity more widely throughout each day. The chapter focused on working age adults begins on page 46. For many, when adulthood is reached and working lives begin, engagement with physical activity can change. Life changes can impact us, which also mean it is easier to lapse into often inactivity trends. It is important that interventions include an emphasis on improving physical activity uptake and that they take an equity lens approach too. So no one is left out of opportunities in Merton to be active, as is illustrated by a resident with a learning disability case study found on page 54. The graph on the slide up there shows adults, and this includes older adults as well, from age 16 upwards who are inactive, which is the red line, top right-hand corner, fairly active, the amber line, and active, which is the green line. Interestingly, the red line and the green line in the graph almost mirror images of each other. This shows for people aged 16 and over, the ability to keep up with being active, that is, at least 150 minutes per week, tends to fall gradually with age, reducing by about 10% between ages 16 to 24 and 55 to 64 years. There is then a steep increase in those inactive from the age of 65 onwards, and conversely a steep decrease in those who are active. Next slide, please. The final chapter is therefore devoted to older adults aged 65 plus, when inactivity and then activity uptake at population level can both tend to move in the wrong direction. The graphs on page 62 of the report show the most marked increase of activity can be seen in those aged 75 to 84, and then increasing further again for those aged 85 plus. As we age, muscle and balance abilities decrease. Strength and balance activities are vitally important, so they keep an individual better able to do day-to-day tasks, and over the longer term, this can help maintain their independence. Specific issues are considered in this chapter, including falls, dementia, nursing and residential homes, and interventions that can help, as well as challenging ageist assumptions that older people should or cannot be active. This includes our acclaimed feel-good folders on page 71 that are aimed at older people with dementia and contain behaviour change activities. These are a national exemplar and have been used as part of the recent CMO evidence of good practice to government. Next slide, please. Just the last two slides here. So there's still so much more that we can do to tackle physical inactivity and improve uptake of physical activity. Recommendations in the report are set out in each chapter. To give you a brief flavour, for the environment, page 29, to ensure that behaviour change programmes are incorporated into plans for new environments. For children and young people, they're on page 45, to give more emphasis on promoting the value of active play for increasing activity levels. For working age adults, page 61, to encourage all statutory and community organisations to promote the benefits of physical activity. And for older people, page 73, to increase physical activity opportunities through an active ageing approach with a focus on falls prevention, maintaining independence and preventing frailty. Next slide. So this is the final slide. Key next steps. Well, one was to publish the report, which was done today. It will then be taken to scrutiny at the end of January and the council leaders strategy group. Communications plan will then be developed for recommendations to be allocated to boards and stakeholders to support, implement and monitor. And for example, Chair, I'm proposing with yours and members' agreement that many of the report recommendations could inform our year 2 plan for our health and wellbeing strategy, which will be discussed at the June board. So I'll stop there, and if there are any questions, happy to answer them, or members of the team can help if they're really detailed. Thank you.
Firstly, just to commend you on a fantastic report. Secondly, it's a question about the communications plan and the dissemination of the information within the report. So obviously I'm here as a voluntary sector representative, but I also represent the interests of older adults across Merton, many of whom will be digitally excluded from accessing the rich information within the report. And I would just like some assurance that there will be adequate provision for hard copies, because you can see from your presentation, they are a priority group in terms of active ageing and preventative health interventions. So.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And we can get copies to you if you let us know how many you think you would like. Then we can make those available. But yeah, we would welcome that. And yeah, please give us feedback based on what they think as well, please. Thank you.
I suppose I'll just echo Sarah's kind of congratulations on the report. I think it's a great report. I think it's really important. We discussed this in a meeting earlier today, is just around linking this with a health and wellbeing strategy, then also with the ask of the neighbourhood plan, which is kind of coming down the line, which the Health and Wellbeing Board. So it's just about that kind of making sure that we're including the really important physical activity in everything that we're planning to do over the next couple of months.
I'm going to echo some of the things that my dear colleague Mark Vrelman has just said. First of all, this is a really helpful report, and the chapter on children really reflects the consultation and the collaboration across the system, and that really positions us to ensure that through schools, through the family hubs, Best Start in Life, school readiness, the work with health, particularly for the 4s and under, that we have tangible tools from this document to take around the changes we would like people to make in the system, but also in our engagement with families, help them understand the importance of this message in a way that is very accessible. So we will join with Mark and others across health in the Merton Alliance in other places to ensure that CLF will drive this as an objective, and the borough of sports being mentioned so many times really helps us to have it front of mind. This is the method that we've got to use to drive activity.
Thank you. I guess it's just thinking through the benefits of physical activity and reducing physical inactivity are quite clearly presented in the presentation about the physical benefits, the mental health benefits and the social benefits, and they are for universal, they are for everybody. So again, when we're thinking through how we design our plans and our interventions, it's not just the top of the triangle. It's not just the most frail individuals that we need to work with, although they need to be focused on. We have to get the bottom of the triangle active as well, because that's where the prevention of future health and care needs come from. So it's just that balance between the two types of intervention.
Thank you. So on page 12 of the report, we are asked to discuss the annual public health report and to review and endorse the recommendations in the annual public health report. That's recommendations A and B. Are they agreed? Thank you. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the Merton Alliance development, and Terry Clark is going to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just take a couple of minutes of people's time just to run through a quick presentation, a couple of slides to give you an update, and then happy to take any questions at the end. So members of the board will be aware that over the past kind of 6 to 8 months, there have been a number of changes nationally in relation to policy. We've had the NHS 10-year plan, we've had the children's social care reforms, we've got the Casey Commission in relation to adult social care. Regionally across London, there's been some work looking at a London integrated neighbourhood teams operating model, and we've got the new model ICB blueprints, and obviously locally there's been some opportunities for us in relation to the Health and Wellbeing Board. So partners from across the system have been working together to see how they can formalise some structures around collectively taking forward some of the opportunities and challenges that we have over the next 12 to 24 months. And I've been working on the development of a provider alliance. And I'm really pleased to say that in December, partners collectively agreed a new memorandum of understanding, setting out how we will work together over the next 12 months to deliver on some of the opportunities and challenges that we have for Merton and Merton residents. That MOU that was signed back in December sets out around the understanding of what integration means to us in Merton, around how we will develop a local operating model for neighbourhood health and care, and starts to define some of the governance structures that we will need. The next slide sets out some of the partners to that provider alliance for people which are on the screen. And then if we move on to the next slide, there are some core decisions and early priorities for the partnership to work on. Things like how we agree resourcing of the alliance, so how the alliance will be chaired, looking at our wider engagement with partners and our staff across the piece, and looking at some core enabling decisions around supporting neighbourhood health and care. And as part of that, we're planning to do some work around a maturity assessment and some development days later on in this quarter. I think I'll stop there. I think it's probably worth just adding at the end that there's a lot going on in this space, and the establishment of the provider group, the Merton Provider Alliance, is setting us up to start to tackle some of those challenges that we have collectively. What we will do is we'll look to bring a broader update to the Health and Wellbeing Board later on in the year, March or June. We are waiting, as Mark said, for the neighbourhood health and care planning guidance to come out, which will set some frameworks and some things that we need to be doing locally. And obviously the Health and Wellbeing Board will be key to the decision making around some of that as we move forward.
Thank you, Terry. Are there any? Mark, do you want to please go ahead?
Thanks for that, Terry. Fantastic summary. I think it's also just really important. There is some really great partnership work that already happens across the borough. And this isn't kind of like Emperor's New Clothes. It's about us organising that and building on it. Yeah, I just want to be kind of clear and assure people that it's not kind of like, oh, here they go again. They're going to come up with a new faddy kind of arrangement. This is ultimately about bringing our services into communities, working together across organisational boundaries for the benefit of our residents. So just to add to Terry's narrative.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, so can we note the update and look forward to receiving further progress reports as this thing comes together and develops? Thank you, Terry. This item is the Strong Communities dashboard, and Samina is going to take us through the slides for this one.
Thank you, Chair. So for the Strong Communities part of the strategy, we have 7 measures that we track regularly. As one of them is establish a collaborative, systematic approach to insight and engagement, feeding the voices of groups with known health disparities into system-wide decision-making. We don't report anything on it at the moment. The plan is to do this in the future. The measure on inequality in life expectancy at birth shows the variation in life expectancy across Merton, and we want to see this variation reduce. It represents the range in years of life expectancy across the social gradient from the most to least deprived. The most recent figure for males is 8.3 years in Merton, which means males born in the most affluent areas are predicted to live 8.3 years longer than males born in the most deprived areas in Merton. This is lower than the previous 2 data points in Merton and are similar to London, lower than England, but higher than South West London. The most recent figure for females is 4.6 years in Merton, and trends have remained fairly stable. Figures are lower for females in Merton than South West London, London and England. This measure is linked to the Year 1 action in the Health and Wellbeing Strategy on undertake work to ensure all VCS grant funding is aligned with Merton's strategic priorities, including those outlined in the new Health and Wellbeing Strategy, in particular to ensure collaborative efforts for targeted interventions and projects to reduce health inequalities. Next slide, please. The self-reported wellbeing measures on happiness, worthwhile and satisfaction scores are ones we want to see an increase in. These are all collected nationally and have not been updated recently. For example, the survey asked respondents, overall, how satisfied are you with life nowadays? For these self-reported wellbeing measures, trends have been similar to South West London, London and England. The self-reported low satisfaction measure shows 5.2% of people have a low satisfaction when they were completing the survey. This measure is linked to the Year 1 action in the Health and Wellbeing Strategy on explore opportunities to build capacity with the VCS to support evaluation and use data to build a robust Merton evidence base of health and wellbeing outcomes for different population groups through future commissioning and other routes. Next slide, please. Emergency hospital admissions for hip fracture in persons 65 years and over by the 30% most and 30% least deprived wards in Merton is a closing the gap measure where we are hoping rates will reduce and the gap will reduce too in those emergency hospital admissions for hip fractures in the most and least deprived wards. We see a mixed picture of both most and least deprived wards for hospital admissions for hip fractures. However, generally, hip fracture emergency hospital admissions are higher in the 30% most deprived wards in Merton. Thank you.
Thank you. So, are there any questions, comments about that information that we've been provided with? Russell?
Yeah, I think it's just worth saying that this is kind of a baseline position. Nothing we have done yet since our new strategy kicked in April will have changed those. So it's a baseline really for us to track that information in future to see how we're doing.
Note the information provided, and we can move on to item 7, which is a meaty item on tonight's agenda, and it's going to be led by Keith and Tony, who've been working together on this. So I think, Keith, you're going to kick off and Tony will come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So for those who don't know me, I think most people know me, but I'm Keith Burns. I'm Director of Policy, Strategy and Innovation, and on my right I have and we're the joint SROs for this priority in the Health and Wellbeing Strategy, and very pleased to be here this evening to provide an update. Just a reminder that the aim of this priority is to address discrimination, foster inclusion, and in response to community voices, create vibrant, connected neighbourhoods that thrive together. And just reflecting on everything that has come before on this evening's agenda, all of that content is in one way or another about fostering inclusion, addressing discrimination, creating vibrant, connected neighbourhoods that thrive together. So very much a kind of continuing theme through this evening's meeting. So that aim, as it says, is about addressing discrimination, fostering inclusion, and responding to community voices by creating vibrant, connected neighbourhoods. And I think much of what we do as a council is directly geared towards achieving those aims. And again, Russell mentioned earlier that the work to remake Morden. Remaking Morden is absolutely about remaking Morden as a vibrant, connected community that delivers positive health and wellbeing outcomes for residents and visitors to the area. And that's just a very clear example of how everything we do as a council is geared towards those priorities in one way or another. The report that you have in your pack this evening, and I think the kind of focus of the discussion this evening, is very much about how we work in partnership with our voluntary and community sector partners across the borough to further enable the achievement of those aims. So I want to recognise that from a council perspective, pretty much everything we do is about achieving that aim, delivering that priority. Tonight is very much about how we work and how the voluntary and community sector work with us to kind of further enhance our ability to deliver that. And I want to start just by taking a little bit of a step back. Tony and I were reflecting before this evening's meeting that it's almost 6 years since the first COVID-19 lockdown. And for everyone, the world changed pretty much overnight. We went from the COVID-19 pandemic almost straight into a cost of living emergency, which we're still living with. And I think it's really important just to start with that kind of broader context about the fact that throughout that period, that 6-year period, our voluntary and community sector partners have delivered incredible things. They've made an incredible contribution to the well-being of the borough, the well-being of our residents, the well-being of our communities. And they've done that in a way that is unprecedented in the sense that it hasn't been business as usual. I mean, Tony and I were reflecting, for the last 6 years, the voluntary and community sector has been operating in that changed environment. And I think it's a testament to the sector that it is still standing, fragile in places, but still standing, still delivering for our residents, for our communities. And it just feels important to acknowledge that. And I think also acknowledging that our community partners, our voluntary sector partners, are often far more embedded in our communities, whether those be geographic communities or whether they be population communities, than perhaps we as a council are, than perhaps the ICB are, than perhaps other statutory partners are. And the experience through the pandemic, the experience through the cost of living emergency has been that embeddedness has given us opportunities to deliver for our residents, for our communities in ways that just wouldn't have been possible had we been trying to do that ourselves. So I think a very, very clear and obvious and hopefully accepted demonstration of the value of the sector in terms of delivering strong communities and helping us to deliver strong communities. Just kind of continuing with the context, and I'll come on to the report and the content of the report in a second, but just continuing with the context. As a council, we have in place interim voluntary and community sector strategies and volunteering strategies, and I just want to kind of highlight that we're taking an approach now which is recognising the distinctiveness of volunteering as compared with the voluntary and community sector, but also that recognises the interconnectedness of those two areas of work in lots of ways. But we want to develop whereas currently or in the past we've had a VCS and volunteering strategy, we want to develop those as distinct but linked entities that recognise the unique role that volunteering plays in many ways that sits outside of the voluntary and community sector. I'm thinking about Borough of Sport and some of the kind of volunteering activity that goes on in relation to promoting physical activity that may be entirely unrelated to the voluntary and community sector, but is incredibly valuable. So we're kind of developing that more distinctive approach. We have agreed in June of last year to roll forward the Civic Pride Fund for an additional year into 2026-27, and Cabinet took that decision in the knowledge that the current 3-year grant programme was due to end in March this year, but that the local, national, regional picture of real challenge for the voluntary and community sector meant that there was value to us in confirming that additional year of funding, providing some additional clarity, providing additional continuity, hopefully, for the sector, or at least for those organisations that are funded through that grant programme. But that also means that we've then got the opportunity to spend more time thinking about how we continue to deliver that continuity, that clarity in subsequent years. And I think we do need to recognise, and I've kind of touched on this, that there is an incredibly challenging environment for the voluntary and community sector at a local level, at a regional level, at a national level. And the sense is that that has been challenging for a significant number of years, but it's getting more challenging. And Tony, I think, just kind of come in at that point.
Firstly, there'll be no Plato in my part, but I would like to sort of also talk to the enlightenment of the Borough Council and many of our colleagues around this table who have been honest and thoughtful enough to understand that we can reach parts of the communities that perhaps they can't, and that they funded us to do that. And that has been critical, because without that faith in us, we would not have delivered. But I think it's true to say that the voluntary sector does rely on funding, and things are increasingly difficult and demand is increasing. And we're at a point where we have to be mindful as a sector as to how we deploy scarce resources. And we are looking at finding different ways of working together and partnership working. I think Motivate Merton was an example, our youth development we did. I think the sector is coming to terms with the level of unexpectedness, the out of the blue things that are happening, and the very difficult, challenging environments we find. But we are finding there is difficulty in terms of short-term funding, which is expensive for organisations to procure, and it's expensive for us to actually continue to apply for. But we are in a climate of uncertainty. We accept that, and we're looking to address that. And we have got our involved sector up and working. We're working with all the partners around this table, and also importantly, we're trying to be patient and wait out and hope that things will turn. We're in a fortunate situation as the voluntary sector, as things happen. We do find organisations that spring into spaces. So Stand Up for Fathers, for example, is a small charity that's suddenly come to the fore, and it's looking at working with single dads who want to get involved with the I suppose the mentoring and the development of their children. And we're looking to find examples of that. If we look at Avanti, how that has grown from a very small organisation dealing with mental health challenges to a much larger, I think the second largest office person now in Civic Centre. There's a number of different things that we're doing to grow and work together. So we are in challenging times. I think there hasn't been a break since COVID, but I think we are starting to find solutions. But we do need help, and we do need, I suppose, support. Continue to need that support.
Thank you, Tony. And there is a point to all of this, so bear with me. So the point, I guess, is that a lot of or a number of the priorities, or a number of the objectives within this priority are about building capacity within the voluntary and community sector to support us in understanding outcomes and impact, support us in understanding how we can work together to close the gap, how we can work together to deliver those strong and vibrant communities. And I think we need to be really frank about the fact that we are and will be asking the voluntary and community sector to do that at a time when it is increasingly challenging just to focus on core service delivery, what the sector does on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to have to work really hard, I think, as partner organisations to make sure that we are supporting the development of ways of working, rather than saying to the sector, can you go away and come up with solutions and come back and tell us when you've come up with those solutions? Because that's not going to work. If we want to deliver aims that underpin this priority, we need to work collectively with the sector to enable that to happen. So turning to the updates in the report, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about those. I think the report is comprehensive. It provides hopefully a very good update on each of the actions. Just to note that action 4 is going to be dealt with in the subsequent paper by Tara and colleague. But in terms of the report that you've got in front of you now, the updates in relation to action 2 and action 6 are very brief updates. Action 2, just as a reminder, is about building capacity to support evaluation and the local evidence base for health and wellbeing outcomes, and that goes directly to what I was just talking about in terms of the need to work together to support the sector to deliver that. That is very much a key aim of our interim voluntary and community sector strategy. So a lot of the activity that my teams and other parts of the council will be involved in over the next 12 to 18 months is very much about building that approach, building that evidence base that supports better decision making in the future. And I just want to flag some ways in which we're kind of thinking about how we might do that. So we have a piece of software called Plinth, which is in use in children's services and is helping to understand the impact of family hubs and some of that early intervention offer. And what we're starting to do is look at how we might use that solution or similar solutions to support the sector to develop some of those outcome measures and that understanding of outcome and impact. So hopefully make use of an existing resource to help us to deliver on a broader set of objectives. In terms of action 6, this is the annual celebration of the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board and the delivery against the strategy. Again, in terms of kind of trying to do this in a way that makes use of existing opportunities, what we're planning to do is to run that event, at least in this year, in 2026, as part of the biennial Merton Partnership Summer in the summer of this year, Partnership Summit, sorry, in the summer of this year. We know that there is a high degree of attendance at the Partnership Summit. We know that we will have all of our key partners and stakeholders there. So it's a really good opportunity to include within that a part of the day that will be about the Health and Wellbeing Board and the achievements of the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's a captive audience. So I think that's a really good opportunity. If that works, we will do that again in 2028 and 2030, and we'll work through ways of achieving a similar outcome in the years that the Partnership Summit doesn't happen, so 2027 and 2029. But you'll hear more about that towards the summer as we build up the summit agenda. In terms of the more detailed updates, action 1, which relates to mapping mechanisms to support engagement between VCS, seldom heard groups, people with lived experience and decision makers. So this is very much about how do we get the voice of residents, how do we get the voice of communities into our decision-making processes about how we can make a difference, how we can have the right impact. There is a lot of work that is underway around that. We're doing some initial mapping. So my teams are working with Merton Connected, with Tony and his team to develop a bit of a baseline survey so that we understand what's happening now. And that's kind of rolling out over the next couple of months. We are, as Tony has said, we've got the Involve network re-established, and that's the kind of wider participation group that brings VCS organisations together. And we think having that re-established is a really good opportunity to begin to talk to those groups about what's the mood out in the communities that you're in, what are the issues, what are the concerns, what's happening, and an opportunity, I think, to broaden some of that engagement. Our community response steering group, which we set, well, the community response hub we set up in the very early days of the pandemic with our voluntary and community sector partners, set up at pace, I would say. We still, 2 days, we still have the steering group that was set up to oversee that work, and that continues to give us a really valuable insight into what's happening out there in our communities. So again, what I think we need to do is identify all of those existing sources of intelligence, soft intelligence, hard intelligence, and bring all of that together in a more coherent way, and that's what we'll be doing in coming months very much. Actions 3 and 5 we have combined. They are separate actions in the strategy, but for the purposes of this update, we've combined them because they are very similar in nature, and the work that we're doing encompasses both of those. So aligning VCS grant funding to Merton strategic priorities and establishing longer-term funding is the kind of summary of those two actions. In relation to that, we are, as I've already said, we've rolled forward the Civic Pride Fund for an additional year at the same funding levels as for the current year. And that also means that the successful small grants programme that we've run as part of each of the 3 years of the Civic Pride Fund to date will run again next year. So there will be a further opportunity next year for organisations to bid for those small pots of funding. And there's some detail in the report about the recipients of the most recent round of that funding, which has just concluded in the last couple of months. And I think the really key piece of work for us as a council and the sector in relation to these two objectives is the design of the next iteration of the Civic Pride Fund. And that work is underway. We've got a small internal officer group at this stage beginning to think some of that through. And as we did last time, we will engage extensively with the sector in terms of the design of that grant funding round. What we want to do this time round is look at what other grant type activity there is across the council and what more we can bring into that single approach, so that we provide a clearer funding landscape for the sector and a clearer understanding of what the opportunities are and where they sit. We do also need, I think, to acknowledge that this is an election year, and inevitably in an election year there are challenges. So one of the challenges for us is making sure that we engage with the sector in a meaningful and proactive way, but that we make sure that we are not preempting decisions that will be made in the next municipal year. Post the election. So I think I do want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that there is that there are challenges this year in terms of the timing and sequencing of some of those events, and we will work together to make sure that those are mitigated and minimised. And I think the only other thing I would want to say is that Merton Connected and the Chamber of Commerce have for a number of years worked together to deliver a Merton Giving programme. And the Merton Giving programme is it's not unique, but it is a relatively unusual partnership between business and the voluntary community sector to come together to raise funds and to disperse funds to local communities. I want to acknowledge that Merton Connected and the Chamber have worked incredibly hard over the last 12 months to revitalise that model. It had become moribund, it had become mired in lots of complexities and difficulties, and I think Tony and the Chamber have worked really hard to kind of reinvigorate that, and it has the potential to be an incredibly important part of our funding landscape in the future as a borough, and our ability to think about how we support the strengthening of communities. And what we want to do is think about, so currently there have been a number of giving rounds through Merton Giving in the current year, but the funding for those giving rounds has all come from the ICB or from the council, and it comes inevitably, because it's public money that is coming to Merton Giving, it comes with strings attached. What we want to do over the next 12 months, 2 years, is build Merton Giving's capacity to attract funding that has less strings attached. So we want to be thinking about, how do we get into the business sector? How do we get into other sources of funding that we can use to respond to the need that we identify in ways that we're not currently able to. So that's a big ambition, and that will take time and effort to deliver, but it's an important part of that overall picture, I think, in terms of delivering stronger communities. You've heard enough from me, Chair. I will stop there, and happy to take questions.
Well, thank you both. And whilst I was listening to you, I was reflecting on my career has been largely in the community and voluntary sector, 40 years, and I have always been very conscious of how the community and voluntary sector can achieve amazing things with limited resources and sheer grit and determination. And over the last few years, you've kind of given us an indication of how that's been, but the creativity within the sector is to be marvelled. And I've also, in that career, worked for national organisations and had the opportunity to look at the relationship between the sector and the councils in different parts of the country. And I have to say, I've got lots of examples of where things haven't been so good. So I think we're really blessed in Merton to have such a good, strong, vibrant voluntary sector, but we're also blessed to have a council that recognises the value of it and wants to work with it. And what you've just done in this report, to me, has kind of demonstrated that that's something that has been happening, and there's a determination that that should continue, and the beneficiaries of that will be the citizens of Merton. So I'd like to thank you both for that, and open it to any questions or comments that members of the board may wish to make. Bev.
I echo what the chair has just shared in this space. I think that in all the activity, outside of here, it might be helpful to have some conversations around a specific children's strand with the 7 priorities that are coming up as a transformation piece for this borough and others. I think there is an opportunity for us to talk about a specific piece of work for children and young people with the voluntary sector.
I'll just add to that then, Beverly. For the Civic Pride Fund, 1.7 million if it comes from adult social care and public health. So Keith will be asking for a nice contribution from children's schools and families to fund that.
I understand.
Now. Mark.
So I suppose it's just to kind of acknowledge the role of the voluntary sector in kind of the transformation of health and care services as we go forward, because whether it's in terms of the real focus on prevention or addressing things like social isolation and anxiety, we know that they're real factors in people's lives and actually end up leading to ill physical and ill mental health. So it's to really acknowledge that. And I'm just interested in terms of going forward, and I think we've spoken about this previously, and if it's not to revisit the ICB's financial challenges, but I think moving forward, there is an opportunity in the work that we're doing through the Alliance to really look at that funding landscape and whether we can do funding mechanisms together, which may also provide some more sustainability than year-on-year contracts. So I think there's something about us picking that conversation up again.
I totally agree, Mark, and I think that the borough finds itself in a very good place because we have all parties want to do that to achieve that, and there's a willingness there. And I think, as Peter said, or the chair said, sorry, that's not always the case in lots of different places or lots of local authorities, so and health systems and VCS groups. So we find ourselves in a positive place. We really want to work with you. We really want to work with everyone. I will always say our funding is limited, and that does place constraints on us and what we can achieve, but we will do whatever we can to make things happen.
Okay, so we are asked to note the very comprehensive updates across the 5 actions included in this paper. I'd like to thank our colleagues for delivering that, and ask the board to note the updates that we've received, and of course there'll be more to follow. Is that agreed? Thank you. So item 8 on our agenda is strong communities, and in particular in relation to action 4, and Tara and Bethan are here to present the update there with slides. So over to you, Tara and Bethan.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to the board for inviting us tonight. It was a very useful introduction from Keith and Tony, because this action is really around some of the funds that we use from climate and the money we take from developers, and how we use this to support upskilling residents. I'm also pleased to say that in reading through the annual public health report, some of those funds have also been used to fund physical activity projects as well. So it's useful to see that it reaches right across health and wellbeing. My name is Tara Butler. I'm the Deputy Head of the Regeneration Economy team, and my colleague is
Beth McGregor, and I'm the Climate Projects Officer.
And all credit should go to Bethan for both the report and the presentation here today. The report contains more detail, but I'm just going to go through a short presentation about the funds. These 2 funds have been running, the top one has been running for 8 years at the council, and it's funded by money from developers. The bottom one, this is the 3rd year coming into it in 2026, so it's been running for 2 years, and that's funded by the council. There are more details in the report and access to the criteria for the funds, but broadly they're particularly focused on grassroots community-led projects, particularly the climate action funds. Next slide, please. So as to what process we go through each year, here's an outline of the process we went through last year. I'll particularly point to February 2026, which is when we're making the decision on, when we're asking Cabinet to make the decision on this funds. So I won't be talking about the projects that were submitted last autumn, but I will be talking about projects that were funded in previous years. And one thing we've learned is we really have to give as much opportunity for community groups to access these funds as possible. And there's no point a council publishing something and saying, surprise, here's some funding, with absolutely no lead in. So each year we start the promotion of the funds in June, and we provide a draft form and as much information as possible. And we attend community groups, faith groups, all sorts of groups to try and promote the fact that in September, there'll be 2 months for people to bid for funding. And that's key, I think, to the success of reaching out and bringing the funds to community groups and not expecting them to telepathically know about them. Next slide, please. So we've picked 4 projects in this presentation to focus on about upskilling residents and, the community benefits, how they affect the wider determinants of health. And this is perhaps the best known one, Martin Garden Streets. And it's been funded for quite a few years. It's run by a local charity. And what this does is when residents who live on streets are interested, they can sign up. And what they get is they get a coordinator to help them. They get free seeds and free plants, and they get invited to planting days. So you can see that the health benefits, the wider health benefits, are not only that you upskill on your gardening skills, but there's also tackling loneliness, physical activity, getting out into the open air, meeting your neighbours, that kind of thing. And there were 177 community planting days in 2024 alone. So if we think that it's been running for 5 years and it's got bigger and bigger and bigger each year, there's the map of the streets that are involved. There's lots and lots of people involved in it. We think there's probably about 1,600 people actively involved, and the WhatsApp groups are obviously much bigger. There's 4,000 or 5,000 people, but there's steadily close to 2,000 residents actively involved each year in Martin Garden Streets. Next slide, please. This is the Friends of Moston Garden, and there's a group in the borough called the Muslim Women's Association, and they got together and bid for some money from the Mayor of London to transform the space at the top left to the space at the bottom right photo. And they also bid for some top-up funding from these funds as well, which we supported. And again, this is about bringing people together, combating loneliness, back into the physical activity point that is so well articulated in the health report. And they have had about 500 people, they say, attending their community events across the 5 events that they've held. And they're due to give us a final report shortly to articulate all of that. Can we do next slide? Thank you. The next item are 2 that are moving away from gardening, but more about sort of upskilling, I suppose. The Wheel has been running for 4 or 5 years, and that is about repairing household items. So it runs out of one of the council buildings, Cannon's House, and it's run by a local charity. And you can attend a repair cafe and have your toaster repaired, or you can also learn how to repair your toaster yourself. And it's got lots of help and assistance through running these cafes from people who are good at this, but also about upskilling residents and bringing them together. And there's a crossover with the cost of living issues that Keith mentioned there as well. We also run from the North Mitcham, the project's also run from the North Mitcham Community Centre. The Pre-Loved Studios is a spin-off from the Wheel. It's also run by a local charity, and that's more about textiles, about how to sew, how to repair your clothes. And it also supports local businesses. So if you are a startup business, you can get a sort of a lead into your startup business if your startup business is around repairing textiles. And there's definite crossovers again with upskilling, literally upskilling, but also bringing communities together and addressing some of the loneliness issues as well. Next slide, please. This is the final one that we've isolated from this. This was run a few years ago. It's a Create Not Hate, and it's particularly focused on young residents of Merton, particularly young residents who are affected by estate regeneration. And there is an organisation that's now called Employ Merton, but back then was called Towards Employment. And they worked with around 120 young people to help them come together and address the issues affected by estate regeneration and homelessness and things like that. And they got involved with an advertising studio, and they were able to do an advertising campaign, which is some of the pictures you see here. And there was some help with doing your CV, there was help with accessing apprenticeships, help with work experience, and all around the sort of digital sphere and the advertising and media and that kind of promotional type thing. In the report, you will see that there's lots of other projects mentioned, and if you are further interested, there's a large report going to Cabinet in February that details all this year's reports, and we're asking councillors to make a decision on those. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you, Bethan. And can I ask for comments or questions from the board? John. Oh, it's just very quickly, it's a comment. It was just to say the two reports, how good they were. Both of them were really good reports. And it kind of shows that health and social care isn't all about providing care packages, GPs and hospitals. It's the huge amount of work that goes on in the council and the voluntary sector every single day to prevent need, that help people's mental health. Because the projects that you're speaking about, people make friendships, helps them towards employment, beautifying the areas, all of it impacts on someone's physical and mental health with gardening and all the rest. So just really well done, Tara. It was a really good report, and you, Tony, as well.
It was just a comment really in a similar vein to John. It's just fantastic to see so many different types of interventions that upskill residents in so many different ways and through nature. It's really impressive. Thank you.
Well, I must say I've learned stuff tonight that I wasn't aware of, but I never cease to be amazed by what is going on. And I think John's absolutely right. This is the kind of thing that will get people out, get people together, break down isolation and stimulate them and help them to form those friendships and partnerships and sort of creativity that is so important. Mark.
What reminds me of some negative comments. So like Councillor McCabe, I'm just generally surprised at sometimes what's out there in Merton, yeah, and I'm just wondering how we work together to kind of make sure that actually we're not surprised, because we already know what's out there, and actually we're directing people to those resources, yeah. And it's a question that comes up all the time, you know, whether it's acute to voluntary sector, we don't know what's out there. So there's something for us as statutory organisations to support kind of that, bringing it all together into a map, yeah, and something that tells people where to go and how to access. Great initiative.
Thanks for mentioning the point about the map, because one of the things we have done is map the geographic location of these projects to make sure that we're capturing them all, but also not directing our resources towards one part of the borough or one part of the community. So that is available, but maybe one of the actions we could take away is working out how we can work more closely with the Health and Wellbeing Board to where there are projects that are running like the repair cafes and things like that, how we can help promote those projects through yourselves to the groups you access as well.
Just a footnote, my toaster's broken, so I'm coming into the mountain tomorrow in the car.
I think we'll turn a blind eye to that, John. Mark does enough to kind of merit a little bit of assistance with his toaster from Merton. Si.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'll echo what others have said. I mean, this is wonderful work, and there's probably some untapped resources there that we could make more of. I also just wonder if, from a system perspective, how we really demonstrate the benefit of this in a manner that can actually genuinely result in less shift of resources and greater investment in prevention. I think there is a lot of discussion within the Alliance around how we use data intelligently, and this is probably an area that we perhaps have not given enough focus on.
I think that's a really important point, Si, and I'd be interested to know whether the
the people of Pollard's Hill have been making use of these initiatives that we've been hearing about. Do you know? Putting you on the spot here.
I won't know, but I'm sure that my link workers will tell me all about it if I ask them.
Well, please do, and get in touch and let me know whether they are. Because I mean, coming back to John's point, one of the things, I think one of the great successes with Borough of Sport is you can get on the website and you can find all these activities that are going on, and I don't know whether there is an equivalent with this, and maybe there is a model there that we could sort of you know, a passing bandwagon to jump on. Tony.
I think it was Socrates who said a borough that plays together stays together, but I would say that through social prescribing, probably a lot of our clients get referred back in and are working on that already, but it does raise that wider sort of question about how do we map that, how are we aware of that, and what do we do? Because I think a lot of it we probably do, we're just unaware that it's happening.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming along and doing that presentation, at the end of which the board is asked to note the approach and progress being made on the delivery of strategic priority 3, action 4, and I think you've certainly given us that update. Can we note that as a board? Thank you. Next item is the item 9, the Health Watch update. Dave, I was looking around for you, and then I realised that you were online. So if you could give us that update, we'd be very grateful.
I feel like now, after going after what's just been, I feel like I'm bringing some of the more like negative, bad news rather than upbeat. Anyway, can you see that, everyone?
See
you able to see the presentation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I can't see you properly at the moment, but I'll just go through it. So basically, this is just mainly about, oh, 1 second. Can you see it if still like this? If I just do it by the page here, otherwise I can't read my notes. Is that okay?
We can see it clearly, Dave.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is mainly about the future of health, local health watch, and that's in relation to this is basically to give an update about recent government proposals around the NHS 10-year plan and the Penny Dash report. Oh, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name's David Curtis, Head of Health Watch Merton. So Health Watch Merton has been hosted by Merton Connected since its inception in 2013. A lot of you will know that the service is well established. The current Health Watch team steering group, with a steering group that consists of Merton resident volunteers that remains active and committed to presenting the patient voice. So what I'm going to talk about now is what does the NHS 10-year plan mean for Health Watch Merton? So what do we know? What does it mean right now and going forward? So what we know in terms of Health Watch changes is that the plan is to abolish the local Health Watch and national Health Watch organisation and its structures. And there's legislative timelines and that in the mix at the moment, including funding arrangement, future structures and concerns, and current implications that may have. So the changes would be put forward is that all 153 local health watches and the Health Watch England will be abolished in their current form. Some of this is going to happen quicker than other areas. I believe that Health Watch England itself changes will happen sooner, because I don't believe they're written in law for them to kind of remain, where local health watches will require legislative change. One of the other changes is to have a new patient experience directorate within the Department of Health and Social Care, and this will take over the role of gathering patient feedback. And the whole point of this, or the aim that's been given, is for this to simplify the patient safety landscapes, reduce duplication and make accountability clearer. So in terms of the future structure, what that means is the ICB integrated care boards will handle the health related functions of local health watch. they will absorb those. The local authority themselves will then have the responsibility to handle the social care related functions of Healthwatch and either bring them in-house or disperse them as they see fit. And patient feedback nationally will look to seek to be done digitally via NHS developed app, which will directly feed into policy and strategic planning at local and national levels. For this to happen, legislation has to change. There's a health and social care bill covering these changes, which is currently being drafted. I believe it's expected to go before Parliament before Easter 2026, and there will be possibility of amendments and delays, some shifts in timelines, and anything that has to happen has to obviously pass with royal assent. What does this currently mean as we stand? There's no real immediate change in terms of local health watch in terms of Merton, because we're still going to continue to be funded until the end of March 2027. There was a piece from government that came out, I think on the 7th, which was stating that they've now approved the funding locally for all local health watch to continue until at least end of March 2027, of which I personally don't feel would continue after that. I think that would be enough time scale for them to look at abolishing and absorbing the functions that it has. So we're going to continue our work as usual. We will continue to share experience of health and social care, influence and support improvements locally, and provide access to information and support. As I stated before, the legal duty as it currently stands still remains. So therefore, listening to patients' experience and influence in care still applies, and the Commission of Healthwatch Services until legislation passes remains. So going forward, we'll continue, as I said, to deliver the work that we've already been involved in, that we're currently doing. In terms of the Healthwatch Merton Advisory Group, that will continue to meet until we have an idea of when Healthwatch Merton would cease. And in terms of delivery of our areas of focus or areas that we're already involved and engaged in, we are going to do a commitment to complete and continue those areas we're already doing. But what we will seek to do is do more short-term, 2 to 4 months or 3 to 6 months max in terms of pieces of work. And we're at the process at the moment of trying to look at how we can support some of the work from public health and the ICB that's going on at the moment, to have some like short quick wins and stuff like that over the next coming 12 months to make best use of the time that we have available. Behind the scenes, we're working with the other 6 local health watches across South West London to feed into the national work around this new digital app that's going to feed in, obviously, patient voice. And the other main critical thing for me in my role and the role for Merton Connected is behind the scenes supporting our staff and the team that we've got to reassure them around the funding, but also support them in their future endeavours and what that may look like. That's the main update. The key thing for me around this is it does carry a concern locally for us, and if you put it in light of everything I just said about underpinning patient and local people's involvement and engagement in all of the stuff we're doing, the value that Healthwatch brings, we have a lot of reach, a lot of body of work that we've done that kind of supports everything that went before. So I think the biggest question to put forward to the Health and Wellbeing Board is, how do we together safeguard the independent, local, integrated, person-led voice in Merton beyond March 2027? So that's not about saving Healthwatch Merton. It's not to do with that. It's about how do we safeguard that voice? And I think that's something for us to look at working together. And I think it feeds into the discussions that have happened earlier around mapping stuff to do with children and young people, looking at what's already in existence with groups and stuff like that, and how and what is the kind of way to continue that going forward, but obviously under a guise that is different to Healthwatch Merton. And that's me complete.
Thank you, Dave. There's a lot of uncertainty that you've described there, and it's coming at a time of huge change within health generally. So I kind of feel that that must be very unsettling for you and the people that work with you, and I just wish you well. I hope that there will be clarity soon, and I think we've all got to go away and think about what we can do together, and have perhaps conversations outside this meeting too. I see Mark and John both nodding, so I suggest that that would be the best way forward for this. But we are very grateful for the information that you provided and for the update. And I think it really is for the board to note the update that Dave has given, and to agree to try and make arrangements as more clarity emerges in the coming months.
Yeah, I think the key thing for me, as I said, it's about safeguarding what's already in place and ensuring that it's built upon, so that you're not starting from scratch. And I think maybe one of the areas of focus maybe for Healthwatch Merton to lead on, and is, well, not lead on, but be part of, is to look at how you can absorb or use our expertise to help develop a kind of different model or a way to continue with existing networks.
Indicated that she wishes to speak, so
I think the point that our chair raised around the uncertainty is noted, and I also think that the encouragement to think about local responses. I'm just very aware of how many parents and carers with children with special education needs and disability access Healthwatch, and I wonder outside of here if we could have a more detailed conversation around how the plans to, whilst we wait for legislative changes, but how the plans will reflect that volume of vulnerability in Merton.
Actually, it's a really important point, and I'm sure there are lots of, yeah. Well, so there is a commitment from the council to discuss these issues with you, and that will happen in the coming months.
Just add that, and the ICB.
Jeremy, you have sat patiently through our meeting, but I hope it hasn't been. I hope you will have learned all sorts of things, and they will be beneficial in terms of your presentation. And you're going to talk about what's coming. This is the Pearl and Dean part of the meeting. You can hum the tune if you like, but just describe what you're going to be doing at our next meeting.
Yeah, you really don't want me to do that. Thanks for inviting me, and I have found it really useful. Thank you, and it gives me a bit of an idea, because this is my first health and wellbeing board, as to the items that you really want to focus on. Under the actions, there are 7 themes for healthy places, and they cut across more than one council directorate. So I'm the senior responsible officer, but also Caroline Bruce, as you know, some of these actions sit within her directorate. And I've got a very brief update on all of the 7 now, and then we'll talk through the 3 that we're going to bring back next time. So, and I won't take very long, I promise. And I haven't got any philosophical quotes, but one quote I like to use a lot is, hope is not a management tool. And the reason I use that is we really need to focus on what outcomes are actually achieved as a result of these. So without further ado, I'll just quickly run through the 7. So the first one is create healthier, greener, sustainable and active environments for people. And just by way of some updates, we've adopted the local plan, which requires developers to produce health impact assessments. And so Mitcham Gasworks and Majestic Way Applications and Turl Road have all gone through a process of health impact assessments, and I'm working with Russell and the team to think about how we can further work on health impact assessments and improvements within schemes. So we're trying really hard at the planning stage to have an influence on healthy places. The other thing to say on this one is that the grounds maintenance contract is about to be relet. It's been through a long procurement process and it's going to Cabinet in due course. And I think the important outcome there is, as part of the contract, we're requiring the contractor to have an engagement, a community engagement worker to work specifically with communities to try and improve the relationship with the Friends of the Parks and people's activity and health related activities. And the other thing on this one is we have developed a walking and cycling strategy, and that's going to Cabinet shortly for adoption, so that's good. The second one is increase the number of people who are playing sport and being active, which of course picks up on the themes for this year. We've adopting a new playing pitch strategy, and some of the things that have happened, for example, as an outcome, is we've refurbished over 47 tennis courts. And what I haven't got is what the increase in participation is, because we didn't know what the participation was before. But that is something we need to keep an eye on. How are these new facilities and improved facilities being used? I'm pleased to say as well, 4 new play zones will be introduced next year. And they're at Sherwood School, Pollard's Hill Youth Centre, Pollard's Hill Recreation Ground and Joseph Hood Recreation Ground. And they've been part funded by the Football Foundation as well. So that's some really positive things. And in terms of encouraging people to walk and cycle, lots of work on the walking and cycling strategies, identified 40 kilometres of strategic routes and 72 kilometres of local routes. So the strategy will set out how we're going to begin to implement those. So, you know, it's becoming easier and safer for people to cycle, which is obviously our preference. We have formalised the operating arrangements with Lime and Forest Bikes. And part of formalising those arrangements are we can deal with some of the less good things about them, like them just being left randomly on the pavement or in the verge, and actually have places where they're docked and yeah, so more people can cycle. So that's the second one. The third one is about enhancing local recruitment and career opportunities. And Employ Merton has worked with more than 300 people in terms of access to work, and one pilot in particular into musculoskeletal, I can't say that very well, so forgive me, has been worked in partnership with Wideway Medical Centre and the Community Health Link workers, so having some real pilots as to what we're doing. The thing to note on Employ Merton is it was a short-term funded priority, and that funding runs out in March 26. So one of the things we're doing at the moment is investigating how we can bring some update back to members of the council with a view to forward funding. The fourth one was about climate action and getting more people involved, and you've just heard from Tara and Beth in my team, so I won't go through those. The fifth one is about housing standards and driving up standards to make sure that tenants are safe. And I've just got some statistics to just to demonstrate. So this year we have issued over 150 improvement notices, of which 112 have been fully complied with, and there are investigations into some of the others. So 2 are partly complied with, 19 are not yet complied with, and 5 are no longer applicable. So there's been real progress there, and we intend to stretch that further into the coming year, where I want, as part of my service, to really understand, particularly under the new Renters Reform Act, and making sure we've got the quality of the accommodation that people want. So some really good progress there. And then the sixth one was about safe environments, and the community safety team and the council have adopted a new violence against women and girls strategy. And we also, from July, implemented Safer Neighbourhood Wardens scheme. and they're going out looking at tackling antisocial behaviour and more minor crime issues, and we've started to see some really positive results in communities as a result of those. And the serious violence duty work carries on in that team to try and prevent. So some positive things there, and what would be really good, I think, is to get some more data about what impact that's having. And then reducing the impact of poverty, including child poverty. I mean, Keith said an awful lot about this evening, but the cost of living events have gone really well. The debt and disability advisory work, the London Living Wage Grant, Merton Young Savers. So there's a lot going on in that respect. So that's just a very quick update of the things across those 7 themes. And I was proposing to talk some more, given that we've had an update on number 4, which is the climate. I suppose what would be really useful for me is if you as board members have got a strong view about which ones you would like a more in-depth analysis of for the next meeting.
And I say thank you for that. And having sort of seen the sort of trailer, I want to go and see the movie now. So the question that you've just posed is, I'd like to hear about all of it, because it's exciting. It demonstrates progress, and but as always, there's a kind of limit to time. But I mean, we're near the end of the agenda, and tonight I think we've had a really good discussion. People have been succinct and disciplined, as I asked at the beginning, but we haven't shortchanged any of the issues that we've looked at, and I think we've done good work. And I just want you to come back and tell us more about what you've just told us. But other people, John, you want to?
I agree. I think it was a fantastic presentation. Again, it's another presentation that shows the huge amount of work that the council is doing. For me, child poverty, all of it, I agree with Peter, all of it I would like to hear about in detail. But the 2 top ones for me would be child poverty and housing, because both of those, especially housing, has a huge impact on people's health. And poor housing conditions have huge impacts on health. So those are the two that I would be really interested in. But I've got to be honest, I'd be happy if you came back and told us about them all in detail.
Ask, or you mentioned there were a couple of things you weren't sure about, you didn't have enough information on. Let me give you some feedback in relation to tennis courts. I drive past some of the tennis courts that have been updated on a daily basis, and I've lived in my home for 40 years, and I can tell you that there are a lot more people on those courts playing tennis. They're young, they're older, there's kids, there's adults, and it's really good to see, because I play tennis when I go on holiday. I never seem to have the time when I'm here. And some of you will know that when I played my grandson at tennis, I incurred an injury, such as the competitive nature of our family. We're not. Well, I was chasing down a ball that I had no right to even be thinking I could get, but and I crashed to earth, as it were. But the other thing that you asked is the neighbourhood teams, and in my ward we've had a problem, and we've got the wardens from Clarion and the wardens from Merton and the police, and everyone has worked together. And I was on the estate concerned today and talking to residents in the pouring rain as we did the estate inspection. I was saying to Jade earlier on, we lead such a glamorous life, us councillors. So it was torrential rain, and there were people out coming, and residents. There was one guy who didn't even have a coat on, and he was telling us that things had quietened down, and that the elderly residents in one block that had had incursions into the block from some local jobs that had gone right down, and they were much happier, and that's as a consequence, direct consequence of the work that your team and other teams working together, as we should always be in partnership, have done. So there's some feedback for you. Russell.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's really great to hear that comprehensive interventions that are going on across the board. We've got a colleague joining our public health team on Monday, Carrie Wood, who's going to be very much focused on the wider determinant. So I think it'd be really good to build further links via Carrie with your team. In terms of the next meeting, walking cycling strategy, I think we could, in terms of how we link in to support you with some of the mapping of the cycle routes to make sure that they align with some of the future programs and routes people may travel to for health, for example, the Wilson. I think it'd be really good to look at that and work with you on that. Thank you.
And I'm sure Mark will be delighted to hear that there'll be sort of routes to get to the Wilson when they do put some money into it and actually create a resource that is in line with the government strategy from hospital to community. So there's some, well done, Russell, we managed to get that money. Okay, so
it's a quick one from
please.
I think that we want to lend the same support from CLLF around the cycle routes around schools. And the clusters around the family hubs, but outside of there, the priorities, I echo what John said to emphasise it is about child poverty, and it will be around the determinants for health linked to housing. And I think we're coming to have a separate conversation in more detail about what that looks like tangibly. So I look forward to being contributing to those in a lot more detail.
I think, just to summarise, we liked it and we're looking forward to some more.
I think an emphasis on child poverty, housing, if we sort of combine cheekily 1 and 2, there was some cycling. So that would mean that employment and then climate, which you'd have an update on, less. I'll still do a little summary so we get an update.
Right. Okay. So can we note this report? Is that agreed? And that concludes the business of the meeting. That there isn't any other business. So, and we have managed to finish in under the time allocated. And I'd like to thank you all for doing that. I hope it's stopped raining, because I've had enough rain today. With the estate inspection on Ravensbury Estate. Tony, do you want to say something? Okay. Well, thank you and safe journey home to all of you, particularly those of you who have a long journey.